Welcome back to Inspire Talks, where every story touches not just your mind, but your soul. Today, I'll tell you a story not about success, not about fame, not even about love, but about something quieter, darker, and more real than all of them. A story about loneliness and how it slowly breaks you, until it teaches you how to truly live again. This is The Room of Echoes. The beginning, the life that looked perfect. Parth was the kind of man everyone envied. A stable job, a car that gleamed like pride, a luxurious apartment overlooking the city skyline, and the kind of confidence that made others say, "He's made it." But what no one saw was that behind the wide glass windows of that apartment, Parth's life was painfully silent. He had everything, yet he had no one. The walls of his apartment echoed with the sound of his own footsteps, and the more success he achieved, the louder that silence became. At work, he was surrounded by people, laughing, talking, pretending. But when the laughter faded, he'd often catch his reflection in the elevator mirror. A man smiling, yes, but with tired eyes that told another story. He came home every night to a fridge filled with food but no warmth, a bed that looked comfortable but never restful, and a phone full of contacts but no one to really call. That's how loneliness hides, not in isolation, but in the illusion of connection, the weight of success. 4 years, Parth kept running, from meeting to meeting, achievement to achievement. Every promotion, every bonus, every new gadget felt good, for a few hours. But when night fell, he'd sit by the window with a cup of coffee and stare at the lights outside, wondering why the world looked so alive while he felt so empty inside. He told himself it was just a phase, that he was too busy for feelings. But what he didn't realize was that success without peace is just another kind of loneliness. One that wears a suit and smiles in photographs. Sometimes, on weekends, he'd scroll through old photos. College friends, trips, laughter that once felt effortless. He'd look at the version of himself that existed back then. Carefree, hopeful, connected. And he'd whisper, "Where did that boy go?" The truth. That boy didn't vanish. He just got buried under deadlines, expectations, and the fear of slowing down. The night of rain. One night, it rained heavily. The sound of thunder rolled over the city, and as lightning flashed, Parth found himself sitting in the dark. Power gone, Wi-Fi dead, phone almost out of battery. He had no distractions left, just the sound of rain and his thoughts. At first, it felt uncomfortable, almost painful, to just sit with himself. But then, something shifted. For the first time in years, he noticed the smell of the rain-soaked earth, the rhythm of droplets hitting the window, and the quiet beating of his own heart. He whispered to himself, "Why do I feel so lonely when I have everything?" And in that silence, the only answer he heard was the echo of his own question. That's when it hit him. He had built a life full of things, but not moments. A career full of milestones, but not meaning. He was successful in the world's eyes, but a stranger to his own soul. The stranger in the park. The next morning, the rain had stopped. Parth, restless, decided to take a walk to clear his mind. He ended up in a park he hadn't visited in years. The same one his mother used to take him to as a child. There, he noticed an old man sitting on a bench, feeding stray dogs with small pieces of bread. The dogs wagged their tails, circling him like he was their best friend. The old man's face glowed with calm, not because life was easy, but because he had learned to make peace with it. Parth sat beside him quietly. After a few minutes, he asked, "Uncle, don't you ever feel lonely?" The old man smiled gently and said, "Lonely? Sometimes. But I've learned something over the years. Loneliness doesn't come from being alone. It comes from forgetting how to connect." Parth frowned. "Connect with whom?" The man replied, "With yourself, with life, with small things. The morning sunlight, the breeze, the sound of children laughing, the chance to help someone without expecting anything. You don't lose people and become lonely. You lose touch with your own heart, and that's where loneliness begins." Those words stayed with Parth long after ever test. That night, Parth stood in front of his mirror. For years, he had seen only the surface, hair combed, tie straight, expression calm. But this time, he looked deeper. He asked himself, when was the last time I did something that made me feel alive? He couldn't remember. He realized he had built walls of logic, success, and independence, so tall that even his own emotions couldn't reach him anymore. He whispered, I don't want to just exist. I want to live. That night, for the first time in a long time, he cried, not out of weakness, but out of release. He let the tears wash away the years of pretending he was fine. And in that breaking, healing quietly began, the awakening. The next day, Parth decided to do something different. He took a leave from work, something he hadn't done in years. He cleaned his home, opened the curtains, played music, and cooked for himself, not out of necessity, but love. He started going back to that same park every morning. He spoke to the old man again. He began volunteering at a nearby shelter on weekends. He called an old friend he hadn't spoken to in 5 years, and said, I don't know why I stopped calling, but I missed you. Slowly, the emptiness began to shrink. He still lived alone, but now, his solitude wasn't painful. It was peaceful, because when you start connecting again, to people, to nature, to purpose, loneliness loses its power. The letter to himself. A year later, Parth wrote a letter, not to anyone else, but to the version of himself that once felt broken. Dear me, I know how it feels to be surrounded by people and still feel invisible, to smile when your heart feels hollow. But I want you to know something. Loneliness wasn't your punishment. It was your teacher. It made you stop running. It made you listen to yourself again. You were never empty. You were just waiting to be understood. And now that you've found yourself, you've found peace. Asterisk. He folded that letter and kept it inside his drawer. A reminder that healing isn't loud. It's silent, slow, and sacred. The moral: what loneliness teaches us. Loneliness is not the absence of people. It's the absence of connection. And connection doesn't always come from others. It begins with you. It's okay to feel alone sometimes, because even loneliness has a purpose. It forces you to look within, to clean the dust off your forgotten dreams, to listen to your soul whispering, you've been away too long, come home. When Parth finally understood that, his apartment didn't change, but his heart did. And sometimes, that's enough. This was The Room of Echoes. If this story touched your heart, share it with someone who might be smiling on the outside but silently battling within. Because sometimes, the kindest thing you can do is remind someone that they are not alone in feeling alone. Sparkles until next time, this is Inspire Talks, where silence speaks and stories heal. If this story touched your heart, then let your finger do one small thing. Hit that like button. And if you want to walk with me in more such journeys, then subscribe. Our next story might just find you before you find it. Thanks for watching. Love you. Bye bye.